And we're live. Here we go. Boom. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got a packed schedule tonight. Man, as we begin in the news, NewsNation, we got two news articles to go over, talking about the Vatican in connection with them going over these apparitions. That's what they call them, but we know what those are. We got Vatican.
T-minus 3 minutes and counting. T-minus 3. We are go with all elements of the mission at this time.
That trips me up every time. I got to take that out. Vatican footage, and we're going to review what Roger Morneau says a little bit. Lex Fridman talked to someone that said some very key things. We're going to look at his podcast because he's a popular podcaster, and a lot of people listen to what he says. Avy Loeb, another interesting quote there. What is God? This is what a lot of people believe, and where do they get that from? We're going to look at Hollywood. Joe Rogan had Bart Sibrel on. You might remember him from a popular moon theory, but he said some interesting things as well about this phenomenon. You're going to want to stay tuned to this episode because that's not it. We got much more coming up. Tucker Carlson, Joe Rogan.
We just passed the 2-minute mark in the
Stay
countdown.
tuned.
T-minus 1 minute, 54 seconds and counting. All indications coming in to the control center at this time indicate we are go. Guidance system goes on internal at 17 seconds, leading up to the ignition sequence at 8.9 seconds. T-minus 60 seconds and counting. We passed T-minus 60.
Mysteries to the universe we were never meant to solve. But who we are and why we are here are not among them.
Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome back to Strange Normal. My name is Bradley, as it says down there at the bottom. We talk about the stranger things that happen in your normal life to give you a biblical understanding of what is going on. And there's a lot going on, so make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit that little bell icon so you can notify yourself when things like this happen. And there's a lot happening right now. There really is. And I say that every week, and I think, it's going to start slowing down, but it never really does. There's always something happening, and it's continuing this narrative that's being pressed by the media through, it must just be a small group of people that are pushing this forward, even into Congress, and they know how to do things because they have an agenda. And whether or not they are deceived or whether or not they are really know what's going on and they want to press this forward as if it's a spiritual political agenda, remains to be determined. The jury's out on that, and we might not know that in this lifetime. But what we can know is that we need to continue to follow what's happening here. So this is what this channel is about. We understand this from a Christian perspective, and what I'm understanding by going over this is the major thing that's becoming more and more of a revelation to me as things go on, is that people, at least a good majority of them, much more than I expected, are beginning to see that this is a demonic representation. This UAP and UFO thing. I truly do believe that in the end, that will be convinced a majority of the people that this stuff is benevolent. And that's the danger, because I don't think it's benevolent at all one bit. It's 110%, at least what we see right now, demonic. Now, what's interesting also to me is that I think these things are going to play both sides. And this is why the Bible specifically says, test the spirits. And it specifically talks about whether or not they believe Jesus Christ is Lord and Savior. This is going to become more and more prevalent as time goes on, because we're going to be actually communicating with them. That's going to be the day. That is the new age that's about to come on. Speaking of that, speaking of these different things that are happening, I want to acknowledge Chris. Thank you so much for your super chat. It says best strange information for the normal person with 4 likes. Appreciate that, and appreciate your support. That's how we continue this channel. We do have a Patreon set up so that you can help contribute monthly. We put these videos and episodes and cut them up and give them to a specific a marketing company, a Christian marketing company that is helping me out with this. And it costs a lot of money, thousands and thousands of dollars, and it's not fun for me to see all that money come from Patreon and put it into a marketing company. But the message needs to go out, and that's what this is for. So 100% of it, all out, everything I can get is forwarded to that marketing company, and you can contribute, and you can help progress this message that there is a major, major thing coming upon this world. I'm going to prove that in this episode by going to patreon.com/strange normal. Now, we don't have any guests tonight, so it's just going to be me. Sorry, your sole host tonight, but this is the channel, and we're going to be covering everything that happened this week. Yeah, just this week. That's how much information is being pumped out right now. So, again, patreon.com/strange normal will get you into our private community where we communicate and talk about this every day. And also, we'll get you some of the podcasts that we don't necessarily air on the channel. Some things we can't talk about on the channel. We're going to talk about things that most people don't talk about from a Christian perspective. Everything from moon landings to the Fauci ouchie, if you understand what I'm saying, and also to the to major things like 2025, 2027. A well-known speaker, a well-known Christian speaker, is going to be presenting on this next week, and I'm going to be recording that. We're going to present that on Patreon, and you can view that before everyone. I'm going to be putting out a few different clips, and you're going to be very interested in what he has to say. He's done a lot of research on this, specifically 2025 and what the occult says about that date coming up. Now, I want to preface it with, we aren't setting any dates. That's not the point of this channel. And the Bible specifically says we don't know the day and hour of Christ's return, but Satan loves to pretend he's God. And he likes to say, hey, I know, and I'm going to do things on a certain time period, and I'm going to present that, but he doesn't really know. But there is interesting dates set up by Alice Bailey and all us other occult writers, 2025 and 2027 being specific. And we're going to talk a little bit about that before we present on this channel. You want to be a part of that, you can help us out and reveal the truth about that by going to patreon.com/strange normal. Let's get on with the episode tonight. It's going to be a very interesting one. So what do we have lined up tonight? Well, we have 2 NewsNation news articles, news broadcasts, talking about how the Vatican is presenting new material and new rules for interpreting apparitions. Now, when they say apparitions, that's very, very, very interesting to me, because when they see these things, these glowing orbs in the sky that many people, especially atheists and educators and all this stuff, they say, well, that's a UFO, because that's what they're seeing. They're not seeing ships or mechanical things. They're seeing these giant glowing orbs, which 200 court cases of the military have been put out right now saying, hey, we're getting... our military has died because of this, and we need to receive compensation. Their families do, but they haven't been by the military. This is significant stuff. And so when these atheists see this stuff, they say, well, these are UFOs. They're not UFOs. the Vatican says they are apparitions. Apparitions? Apparitions of what? Well, when they get reports of this stuff, because apparently, according to them, they get a lot of this stuff, and they need to be able to figure out if it's nonsense or if it's legitimate. And so they are doing a live, basically, about what it is that is legitimate and what's not. Specifically, I'm sure they're going to be referring to UFOs. We're going to see what they exactly say about that. I think they kind of laugh about it a little bit, but it's interesting to me. Why are they doing this now, especially since this hasn't been done in a long, long time? Well, you know what? Enough of me talking. Why don't we just get into this and see exactly what the NewsNation has to say about this weirdness that's happening here? Well, check this out.
Dr. Paul Thigpen, with a PhD in historical theology and author of the best-selling book titled Extraterrestrial Intelligence and the Catholic Faith. Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
So you and Congressman Tim Burchett were on NewsNation's podcast, Reality Check with Ross Coulthart. Love that podcast. The congressman said he believed the Vatican knows that extraterrestrial life exists. He was very confident. I know you've been following this for a very long time. What do you make of what the Vatican is saying this morning?
Well, it's, I've only found one news site actually reporting that it was going to mention aliens, and they didn't attribute that data point. If you look at the website for it, it limits itself to talking about apparitions and related paranormal phenomena. And it's supposed to be kind of an update of protocols that the Vatican had for handling cases like that. So they only started a few minutes ago. You have them there live right now. So haven't really had the chance to hear what they've said or to see the document itself. My guess is that it will probably not mention aliens. I would be surprised if it did, and all things are possible. But I think it's going to focus on apparitions and the kind of paranormal phenomena that often accompany apparitions. So by apparitions, we mean people who claim to see Jesus or the Virgin Mary or angels or other saints,
Sure.
And sometimes to hear things as well.
So is there evidence of angels and aliens being one of the same? Do you believe that could be true, sir?
Wow.
I think what we're encountering right now in the UAP studies is probably different things. There are a few things that I think seem to fit a demonic profile, but I don't think the majority of them do. Others, I suppose, could be angelic sightings, but I think it likely that we're talking about some other things too. Genuine extraterrestrial intelligence, perhaps intelligent species that are crypto here on Earth. I think it could be a lot of things, and maybe angels are one of them, but we'll have to see.
Dr. Thigpen, I'm curious here. How do you prove an apparition, especially to non-believers out there?
All right, let's pause it right just for a second. I'll bring it back. He seems to indicate that he doesn't believe that all these things that he's seeing right now are absolutely demonic. The Bible does give us a test to tell if these things are demonic or not. And, I'm going to give it to him, at least for now, that since they're not talking to us, we can't legitimately say that they are demonic, but there's 20 reasons why I believe they are demonic. And we have plenty of data to indicate that this is a deception and that's happening. I made a video about it. If you look at the top, you go to my page, YouTube page, and look for the top 20. You'll find the reasons why I believe that these are demonic. And I don't think this guy has a leg to stand on. I wish the commentator, the actual reporter, someone who's investigating this thing would actually say, well, why do you think that? But, of course, the news never does the excellent reporting that it should, and it just flows with the narrative that he presents. So that's my beef with that. But let's continue to see what he has to say on this topic. Here we go.
Well, it's maybe hard to...
There is the audio for this clip now.
To prove...
Did I mess it up? This
the
is
non-believers in some ways.
That's what happens when you do lives.
Maybe angels are one of them, but
can anybody hear the audio? Is it just me?
Seem to fit a demonic profile, but I don't think the majority of them do.
Yes. Let's go back. Let's back it up to the beginning and see if I've messed this audio up.
Dr. Paul Thigpen with a PhD. Well, NewsNation's Joe Khalil is Dr. Paul Thigpen with a PhD in historical theology, especially to...
We might have to cut
non-believers
this
out there.
part out, but I'm going to say that we've got...
maybe hard to prove to non-believers in some ways, but the kind of evidence that that the appropriate officials would gather would be first to try to determine the facts of what happened. You know, so somebody reports that there was a light in the sky, that others see it. Is there, you know, any other evidence of it? Is the truth being told? The people who are making the report, they would want to look into their background some. Do they seem to be people of integrity? Could there be medical or psychological issues there? So that to try to rule out things like hallucination or even hoax, counterfeiting. They look at the content of it to see, what's being said. If someone claims, for instance, makes a claim like God and Satan are the same being or something, they would say, yeah, that's probably not divine. And also just verifiable information. If somebody says, okay, the Virgin Mary came to me and said that on such and such a date, the world will end, and it didn't end. That's pretty good evidence, that it wasn't true. So there are more, people don't realize, I think there are many more apparitions that the Vatican would say, nope, we don't have evidence, than those that it would approve. Those are few.
They do their research for sure. And like you mentioned, the Vatican is actually releasing those findings right now. We just started a few minutes ago. But David Grush, he told NewsNation special correspondent Ross Coulthart the Vatican was in possession of a UFO aircraft from 1933. Do we have time to listen to that, guys? Yeah, here it is.
1933 was the first recovery in Europe, in Magenta, Italy. They recovered a partially intact vehicle. The Italian government moved it to a secure airbase in Italy for the rest of kind of the fascist regime until 1944, 1945. And, the Pope Pius XII back-channeled that.
So the Vatican was involved?
Yeah, and told the Americans what the Italians had, and we ended up scooping it.
So let me be very clear about this. You're saying that the Catholic Church, the Vatican, they know about the existence of non-human intelligence on this planet?
Certainly.
Dr. Thigpen, you also spoke to David directly about this. Do you believe the Vatican has been covering up proof of extraterrestrial life?
Yeah, I wouldn't use the word cover up. You have to think about the historical circumstances. If it happened, there's no way I can know for sure. But I certainly take David at his word, David Grush, that he was given that information. He also, said to me that certain documents have been published a couple of decades ago that, are alleging this. And you look at those and you say, maybe they're not so convincing. But David says he has for additional evidence. He's not just depending on that. So given that, I trust his testimony.
Interesting. All right. So he trusts his testimony. I wasn't able to hear audio because I had hit the button on my mixer that didn't allow me to hear audio. That's what happens when you're mixing while you're doing the producing of the show. It's okay. We'll figure this out together. So that's interesting. We've covered that before on this channel, where apparently the Vatican has been involved since 1933. This is public information. This is factual information. This isn't some obtuse, strange, alternative website. This is out here in the mainstream media now. That apparently, at least under oath in Congress, David Grush had said that this thing is something has been recovered since 1933, and he's able to talk about that. The Pentagon has allowed him to talk about that, which the jury's out right now on whether or not that's called a whistleblower or they're allowing that to happen. I'd like to hear in your comments what you think about that. But every time I talk about this stuff, I try to narrow it down to just the factual information that is being presented to the public. I know there's a lot of information right now that can be presented, but isn't necessarily proven, or at least out there in public. So when we cover stuff on this channel, I'm going to show you how this narrative is progressing on this channel through the mainstream media, but also digging into the facts around the area, so I don't make this channel too kooky, and it needs to stay that way so that we can remain legitimate. I hope you understand. But we will cover a lot more things on Patreon that we don't normally cover here. So that was the first clip from NewsNation that we were covering. Let's go to the next one. Let's see what else they're saying about this, because they did two clips on it. Check this out.
Well, NewsNation's Joe Khalil is live in Washington. Joe, did the Vatican speak on UAPs specifically at all?
They did not today. What happened today, what we got was actually just a laying out of new guidelines from the Vatican as to how they vet and review what they're calling supernatural phenomenon. These are religious things. So they get reports from all over the world all the time about appearances or apparitions from religious figures, people who genuinely in some cases, and maybe in bad faith in others, report that they see religious figures appearing in front of them. Or, for example, this is a case that is reported often in different parts of the world where you've got a statue of a religious figure, Christian religious figure like Jesus Christ or like the Virgin Mary that ends up having tears of oil. That's one that we've seen more than once now. So the church is basically saying now they've got a new process to review which ones of those are explainable, which ones may be mistakes or misunderstood, and which ones may just be straight up hoaxes or false. And then the other category of what they may appear to be legitimately things that they cannot explain with human means. So that is what we're now getting now, these new guidelines. And effectively, what we're seeing is the Vatican wants a deeper hand to deal with these kinds of things more directly. The new guidelines we got today says that the local bishop, which for those who are not religious or may not be familiar, that's a religious authority within the church that's higher than a priest and sort of the go-between from a local Christian Catholic community and the Vatican. The bishop would directly respond to these kinds of reports, make a determination, but then it would be kicked up to the Vatican, so the bishop doesn't make any declarations unilaterally. The Vatican itself would have a body where it reviews these types of reports and then deems for itself whether it's credible and legitimate, or in the digital age of deep fakes and AI, whether it may be something else, maybe something more nefarious. And the church in these new guidelines warns that there are those cases where people may be trying to profit or benefit in some way from a false claim about these kinds of supernatural, unexplainable, or unidentified phenomena, Nicole. So that is what we have today. And again, interesting because this is the first time in some 50 years that the church is openly discussing and talking about how it's going to handle these kinds of reports. Now, you talked about the David Grush claims. There have certainly been people on Capitol Hill and elsewhere that have tried to make that connection between some reports relating to the Vatican on UAPs. Those have not been confirmed or proven that we know of yet. Haven't seen concrete evidence of that, but certainly there are some people that try to draw that line. What we can tell you today, though, is that the church does receive all kinds of reports about these unexplained phenomena as it relates to religious figures, and now it seems that the Vatican wants a more direct hand in examining them.
Boy, oh boy, we're gonna look at that clip here in a minute where they talk about specifically about UFOs at this Vatican conference. And I think it's fascinating that they want a deeper hand in this. They want to have their hands on this a little bit more so they can what? And that's coming in the next few months. I believe it. They're going to have a deeper hand in this. They want more on this. It's like Congress saying, "Hey, we want more money. We need more to know more about this stuff." That's really interesting because they are going to get that. They're going to have a deeper hand in it, and I believe that they already do have a deeper hand in it. They just want to reveal that more. We're going to do something different on this channel just for a moment and hold back because we are going to show a little bit of the clip of that Vatican conference as we dig into it. We've dug into it a little bit. We're going to dig into it a lot more in the coming episodes. But I want to remind you that I make a living off of not this. Like I've said, money goes to marketing. And marketing, this is a ministry. Everything that you put in is going to present this message and show the true gospel behind what's going on here through revelation, through Bible prophecy. But how do I make money? Well, I'm a real estate agent. I'm still wearing my pin, if you can see it here. But I showed 7 properties today. If you're in the Chattanooga area, And if you know someone that is moving to the Chattanooga area, perhaps going to the universities here, we have Lee University, we have Southern Adventist University, and we have Covenant College, big private universities that are on this area. If that's someone that you know that's coming to the Chattanooga area to go to school, to move here for a reason, if you know somebody, or if you are, please reach out to me. And you can reach out to me through my email address, which is bradley@strangenormal.org, or you can text me at 423-749-0000. Please don't call me, text me. But if that's something you're interested in and you want to view some houses and I can help you find something, that's important to me. That's how I make my living. And if you know somebody that is, please give them my name. I'd love to hear from them. All right, let's go and view this Vatican information that's happening here. This is very interesting, what's going on. I need everyone to look at their screens now, because if you don't look at your screens, you're not going to be really able to read the captions. And you got to read it carefully, because their captions are not good. And Vatican Italian is very difficult to understand when translated to English. That's at least what I've found. And let's just watch it. Here we go.
And the priest.
So wouldn't it be interesting? It would be.
Seconda domanda, se mi permette, perché forse sembrerà una domanda un po' più strana. C'è stata una grande attenzione da parte dei media sul cosiddetto fenomeno UFO, con autori e scienziati di spicco in luoghi come l'Università di Stanford che hanno affermato che gli incontri UFO sono in realtà incontri spirituali, che alcuni resoconti che parlano di apparizioni celesti e simili. Alcuni in questi giorni hanno suggerito che questo nuovo documento fornisce norme anche per la valutazione di queste esperienze. Sua Eminenza può confermare che è così o non è così, solo per evitare su social?
Grazie. Poi gli UFO non siamo specialisti, veramente non possiamo intervenire, no? Potrebbe accadere che un certo fenomeno di questo tipo sia collegato a un fenomeno religioso cristiano, no? Cattolico. In quel caso si vedrà, ma altrimenti no. Questo potrebbe accadere anche in altre religioni, non è compito nostro, no? E fuori dalla fede meno ancora, certamente.
And the
Okay, so that's interesting. So he says that.
So wouldn't it be interesting? It would be really fascinating.
Alrighty, we're having all kinds of trouble tonight. What's interesting is that they're saying that this phenomenon, is it related to the Christian, and then they stop and say the Catholic phenomenon, which is the Catholic idea of spiritualism. And they say, well, no, well, maybe, we're not sure. And we're gonna talk a little bit more about that. But what they're doing essentially is they're presenting on the apparitions. They're presenting on the spiritualism, and they're understanding that the Stanford University says that these are one and the same. There's someone there, one of the scientists, I forget his name, Avy Loeb, maybe, I forget, or maybe, no, it's the other guy, the medical guy. Anyway, fascinating stuff, because they don't seem to want to. There seems to be a little bit of hee under the table still with this the word UFO, obviously, but they're talking about apparitions, because that's apparently not as silly. So I think it's interesting that these two things are very connected. If you look at the Bledsoe podcast, Chris Bledsoe on the Concrete podcast, we did a full episode on him, and actually he's in the top 20 reasons why this is demonic. He had this thing, these giant glowing things come up to him when he was still a Christian, and he said these things came up and they presented themselves as a woman, and then came later and presented themselves as a woman with a bull and calling herself Amun-Ra. Amun meaning the creator, Egyptian, and Ra meaning the sun god. We know all about that. That is absolutely demonic entities that have same things have appeared a long time ago in Egypt that the Egyptians worshipped, and that the God of the Bible proved that he is greater than them, because they worshipped the water, they worshipped every type of god, the frogs. But he said, look, I am over all these, and I can prevent them from being what they think they are as powerful. So all that happened. All that's in Exodus. But these things are appearing right now, and they're presenting themselves specifically to Bloodsoe and probably others on earth as well, saying, we want you to identify us and present us to the world. That's happening in our lifetime, in this year, even last year too, 2023, 2024. That's when this video is aired. That's fascinating to me. Why in the world is this happening right now? Well, we actually know why this is happening right now, and we have a very fascinating man by the name of Roger Morneau. Morneau grew up in Montreal, Canada. His name, and he was asked to be a part of a Luciferian group that worshipped demons. This is a very closed-knit society of not just a bunch of chubby people running around with weird hats on and horns on their head. This are actually he said, all the doctors. They had big musicians. They had well-known surgeons, lawyers, and they were all a part of this group, and they knew exactly what they were doing. It wasn't just some group that was necessarily deceived, but they were told specifics about the coming of Christ, about the coming of not only Christ, but also demonic entities. One of the things they said about that was very interesting, and what we base our whole channel around. One of the things that they said was this. This is him being interviewed by Heart Research Media. Watch this.
And the priest told us, we talked quite a while, and then he said, could I have a little bit more of your time? I want to do something very fascinating. He says, the grain plain, the master's grain plain, for harvesting the nations, for harvesting the multitudes of the earth into his cause, just before the close of the great controversy between the forces of good and evil. So we continued, after we expressed ourselves that we're deeply interested to know more about the activities of spirits. And he said it's going to be done in a unique manner. This grand plan is going to take people are going to eat the stuff. Because he says spirits, demon spirits, will declare themselves to be inhabitants of far distant planets in the galaxies that are coming to warn the inhabitants of planet Earth of the impending destruction of the planet unless something seriously proper is done to avoid it. The spirits will show themselves willing to give valuable guidance that will not only help people avoid the destruction of the planet, but it would cause it to enter into a higher state of existence. For instance, he said the spirits will promise, and this is a big word, promise, that if their recommendations are followed carefully, they will usher in a glorious new age of peace and prosperity, and there'll be, there'll be no more wars, you see. There'll be no more famines. There'll be no more people getting unhappy with one another. Neighbors will love neighbor, and social unrest will not take place no more. There'll be perfect happiness for 1,000 years. That's what the Spirit is going to promise.
And he used the words New Age to describe what was coming.
It would be a glorious new age, yeah. And this is exactly what the movement is all about today. And he went on and said, as I said earlier, that as life on this planet becomes more and more difficult, and calamities will strike the planet more and more frequently, the spirits at that time are going to put all their effort to impress religious leaders, to bring before the masses of the earth the sacredness of Sunday.
Wow. There's a lot to unpack there. And I admit it, because we haven't really covered all that on this channel. But we did allude to it quite a bit throughout the many episodes we've talked about. And we talk a little bit about how in Revelation 13, it says that there will be a significant worship problem. If you look through Revelation 13, look at all the times it says worship. It says worship about 3 or 4 or 5 times throughout that chapter. And Revelation 13 is when this whole thing starts to break upon the world. There will be a worship problem. And what's really fascinating about that is that nowhere in the Bible does it say that Sunday is sacred. But when the nation, specifically the United States, who is based on religious freedom, says that you are no longer religiously free and you must worship because of something, and joins hands with other religions like the Vatican and spiritualism itself as well, that's when you really got to start paying attention. What is happening here? And as Jesus said, I'm telling you this now so that when things do happen, you do believe. You don't have to take my word for it. Go ahead and study it for yourself. But this is something that is a significant part of Bible prophecy. And so what he's talking about is when his satanic priest told him all this stuff, he said, this spiritualism that we're seeing right now is going to be presenting itself as demonic entities going to pretend to be, you guessed it, aliens. Beings from far distant galaxies coming to Earth to tell about impending destruction. There's global warming, there's climate change, all wrapped in one. You see all these things coming together now. You have everything happening. The Pope's talking about global warming and climate change. Yeah. And then you have spiritualism that will come and present itself about global warming and climate change. And then you will have them present, hey, you know what? All these things will stop happening if you just worship a different way. This is where it all comes down, folks, and it's already going to start happening with all this trauma, I believe. This is my own understanding of this. All this trauma that's happening with nuclear war and everything. It's all going to come together really, really fast. Really fast. And so keep watch. That's what the purpose of this channel is, to understand exactly what's going on here. So what's next here? Well, on popular podcasts, we have people discussing this idea of spiritualism, which is the beings that people are seeing. And they're talking a little bit more seriously about it being actual spiritualism and not just aliens. Watch this. This is Lex Fridman, who runs a very popular podcast, millions, I think, subscribers. I believe so. I got to look into that. I'm not sure. I mean, he might be in the hundreds of thousands. But and then Paul Rosalie. I think he's not an economist. I got to look up his. I just had it. Rosalie. He is a conservationist and author. And he talks, I think his book is called Mother of God. I haven't looked too far into him. Someone might want to dig into this a little further. But he starts talking about this stuff, and he starts throwing some things out there that I thought was fascinating. And I think you will too. Check this out.
So wouldn't it be interesting? It would be really fascinating to me if we found out that there were aliens living among us and we couldn't see them. And what some of the people were calling aliens, the scientists, the religious people were calling angels. And then everybody had this realization that whether you call them aliens or angels, there are these there is way more to the universe than we're realizing.
Okay, so way more to the universe than we're realizing. And people are saying that these things are aliens, and the religious people are saying they are not aliens, they're angels. And what we discover is they're the same thing. Aliens are angels, and there's good and bad ones. Isn't that fascinating to kind of bring all the world together and say, hey, look, you guys have been seeing this over here from a scientific aspect. The religious people have seen this over here from the religious aspect, and you guys are both right. Now the world's together and happy, and they can all do something that's similar, as long as all these beings indicate the same thing, right? Everything's coming together perfectly because they think that's what they think anyway. But there's going to be a small group of people that realize the truth about this whole thing, the truth that's presented here. One of the ways that we've realized on this channel that they are going to present this information, them meaning spiritual entities, is through appearing as dead people. Now, I can't go too deep into that because I've done this over and over on different shows, but ufologist researchers and MUFON directors have brought this out. Specifically, Joe Jordan. He's a guy that works even in the Kennedy Space Center, and he does some amazing research. And some of the things he found is that calling out to these entities, I mean, not calling out to them, but calling out to God while these entities are oppressing somebody, gets rid of them. It stops the abduction process when they think they are in a UFO. And so not only that, but usually when these things are happening, things like this are presented to them as dead relatives. Dead relatives asking them to do something that's against the Bible. That's happening right now in your lifetime. Something that I think that is fascinating because we've often been told that this stuff would happen at the end of time. The Bible, and it's all right there. So let's dig into what else is being said about this, because not only is Lex Fridman and Paul Rosalie saying this stuff, but also Avy Loeb, who has been researching this very closely, and the news loves to follow this guy. He believes that, perhaps God isn't who he says he is. He's just a alien, which is another combination of, these religious people were right and we were right too. It's all coming together, folks, just as they hope. Watch this. That's not it.
You've said previously, I'm struck by the religious references you've made there, and you've said previously you're not religious, but that you're struck by the order we find in the universe, by the regularity, by the existence of rules of nature. And you've said you are in awe of how the laws of nature we find here on Earth seem to apply all the way out to the edge of the universe. And that is remarkable. Does such order ever make you wonder not whether there's a creator, be that a god, or maybe it's just a highly technological, incredibly advanced alien civilization?
And I think in the distant future, if we find a neighbor that is far more advanced than we are, that has access to technologies that we do not understand, that experience will be similar to Moses in the biblical story, seeing the burning bush that was never consumed. And, obviously you can find online nowadays gadgets that would impress Moses as much as he was impressed to believe in a superhuman entity that he called God. But even for us, if we bring technologies that we will use 100 years from now, if we were to witness them now, we would be at awe, a religious awe, and we might start to believe in a superhuman entity. And for me, this is, the sense of awe that was lost when Friedrich Nietzsche said God is dead. And, after that, that was in 1882. After that, we had the age of science and technology that manifests hubris, human arrogance. And it's about time for us to develop a new sense of modesty. And I think that sense will be brought by a package from a neighbor that we would find in our backyard.
Boy, they're prepping us, aren't they? Oh, if these only things would come and just give us something that we could tell that they present themselves as God, but actually they're just highly advanced beings, and science was right all along. Evolutionary processes, blah 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 blah. I think what's going on here is we're seeing this, like I've said just previously, it's coming together. Now, where's he getting all this stuff? Well, he's being seeded. That's right. He's being seeded by media. And how do we know that? Well, because media has presented this all the time. And this media starts as, I'm going to pull a longer clip that I used in Starfall. If you haven't seen this movie, starfallmovie.com. It's a movie, it's a short documentary style movie, about 30 minutes long, that I produced to kind of catch everyone up 3 years ago on what's going on here. So if you're new to the channel, you should go watch starfallmovie.com. But this is a short clip from it that I've extended from the series Stargate SG-1, one of my all-time favorite when I was growing up as a kid. But watch what they say. Very, very serious stuff.
Hello, I'm
Daniel Jackson.
Right.
From the planet Earth.
Okay. So you know my name and where I'm from. You see, we're explorers. We'd very much like to get to know you. Your society, how you came to be.
A prior has been dispatched to the place from whence you come.
Really? You can do that. I thought we were in another galaxy.
It is the will of the Ori that we should spread origin to all those blessed by their creation.
Okay, well, I think you should understand that there are many different kinds of people in the place from whence I come. People who believe in many different things.
They shall find the path to enlightenment.
Right. Well, I think you should also understand that they may not see your way as the only way.
The power and the greatness of the Ori cannot be denied. Those who reject the path to enlightenment must be destroyed.
All right, I'm going to pause it right here just for a second because we got to talk about this. Obviously, what this guy is right here, and he's presenting, the writers of Stargate are presenting him as the God, or he says the creator. Our origin, or the Genesis story, needs to be told, and those who don't accept it must die. Now he's presenting this gospel from kind of a Gnostic idea of, God is this terrible being who just wants to destroy unless you believe what he says, which is not the truth of the Bible. The Bible actually says that God wants everyone to be saved, and you are on a collision course with terrible if you don't. And so God wants to take you out of there, but he can't because of what has happened, because we have accepted sin as a rebellion against God. And so Satan basically has the rights to this thing. And so he says, if you follow the love, the truth, which is love, a love of Allah, basically, don't sin. What is sin? It's a transgression of the law according to the Bible. And specifically, the 10 Commandments say, love your God and love your neighbor. And that's the first 4, and the last 6. Love your God is the first 4. Love your neighbor's the last 6. And so what you have here is a reverse of this idea. And what they're trying to convince you of in this thing is that, number one, God is not who he says he is. He is a machine, or a type of a human entity that is more like a machine. Oftentimes in Hollywood, they present the godlike figure as robotic and machine, and that's how he's talking right now. But he's not necessarily a machine. He's just very ordered and structured as he's talking. Now, what he's presenting is that Daniel Jackson, who is the good guy supposedly in the film, he's presenting Satan's side of it, and he's saying, you are not supposed to kill people. How dare you kill people just because they don't believe in you? This is what atheists have always said for a long time. And it's completely twisted the gospel, because it's not, that's twisted, and it's flipped around, because it's not that God's going to kill us. It's that we are already going to be killed unless we allow him to save us. So that's the flip of it. But he's going to continue on, and listen to what he says about this.
Right. I was afraid of that.
The Book of Origin says, those who seek the path to enlightenment must not be led astray.
Right. You see, that can be interpreted a number of different ways. I think maybe I know what the Ori are, who they are. And I'm not denying they are very powerful beings, but if I'm right, they're not gods. They're like the ascended beings I know. They simply have a greater understanding of the knowledge of the universe.
What is a god but a being that is worshipped by those beneath? Is great knowledge, power, understanding not enough for you to revere the Ori?
Respect, yes, certainly, but That doesn't mean I would murder innocent people in their name. I guess what I'm trying to understand is whether the Ori have spoken to you directly and told you to worship them, or whether you've misinterpreted some evidence you found along the way and developed this religion on your own. I can't speak for everyone in my galaxy, but in my own humble opinion, I don't believe that any individual or society can achieve enlightenment through fear-mongering and forced servitude, no matter what power is presented as evidence.
Anyway, there you go. That's exactly what I said. They flipped it around, and they're trying to present God. God is not this all-powerful being. He's not this guy who knows everything. The Bible presents him as omniscient, which is all-knowing, omnipresent, everywhere at once. And so in what these people are saying, what atheists have said, what writers of these atheist broadcasts have said, what ufologists are coming to say, what scientists are trying to say is that, look, he's just an alien. He's an alien that has undeservedly required us to love him. And this is not necessarily true. We are created to love. We are created to worship. And we need, when we find that purest form, which is worshiping God, we will have that joy. And it's the best life we can ever imagine. And so that's what's happening right here. They're trying to get you to flip your mindset into Satan's satanic mindset through this whole thing. And that's how Avy Loeb, who was talking in that last clip, came to this conclusion that, oh yeah, that's what God is, by watching this media junk that's happening right here. So stay away from this stuff. It's really entertaining. It's fascinating. I got hooked on Stargate SG-1 just because Richard Dean Anderson was in it, and MacGyver. He was the original MacGyver, and he did a fantastic job of presenting that show. I loved how he wasn't violent and all this other stuff. And then almost like a transition that was perfect, he moved from this very successful episode and season of MacGyver to Stargate SG-1, which lasted a decade or more. And it kind of transitioned a lot of people who enjoyed watching his character into that. And so I think that's kind of what happened, what's happening here, and what happened while I was watching this too. You might have experienced this too as growing up as a kid, but this is Daniel Jackson, who is a co-character on the show as Richard Dean Anderson's character, Jack O'Neill. Anyway, probably too much information. You guys don't need to know all about this SG-1 stuff. I loved it as a kid, but it definitely had a sadistic presentation in some places, and that's how the devil works. Just as Christ said, go and throw seed on the ground, and the weeds and the tares in the actual good soil will sprout forth good, but you can't tear them apart until the harvest. Satan is seeding too. He's seeding the weeds, the tares. And so this stuff that's happening here, it has great content 90% of the time, maybe. And it has this spurts of stuff in here that make you change your mind about stuff. And that's the danger in it. That's the super danger in what's going on here. And we can also use this in the gospel though too. Go and do your job as whatever you do. Maybe you run a business on the side. Maybe you have something that makes you money. You don't have to be proclaiming Christ in every single instance. Go and seed here and there. Put it in the ground and let the Holy Spirit bring forth the fruit. You don't have to bring everyone from atheist into baptized Christian if you are a Christian. The way to push the message forward is to seed a little bit here and there. Let's move on. There's a lot bit more I want to talk about here. Joe Rogan had, and the reason we cover Joe is because he's the biggest and the most talked about podcast on the internet right now. And one of the things he had on one of the people he had on is Bart Sibrel. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but Bart is well known for his theories about the moon and whether or not we arrived on it. Now, knowing my audience and knowing doing surveys, I know that the majority of you do not believe in the moon landing. And that's not what we're going to discuss here tonight. I don't have an opinion on that. I think it's fascinating information. I do believe that absolutely there was a time of war and we were trying to convince people of things, and there might have been some of that. We might have gotten there too. We don't know. So let's table that discussion just for a second, but listen what Bart says about UFOs and UAPs, because this is the information that's being presented to the masses. So let's get an understanding of what's being presented in this last week. Let's go.
Okay, can I assume that then, Bob, what you're saying, that you don't think UFOs are real at all?
No, they are real, but they're not from outer space.
Okay, but what about the ones that Kenneth Arnold saw in the 1950s?
I don't know about those. But
so this is the first
I think UFOs are real, but they're not from outer space, according to the top 2 UFO researchers. I have a book coming out, hopefully in time of this podcast, Aliens from Planet X, that talks about their origin and future appearance. And UFOs are real and aliens are real, but they're not from outer space. And that's according to the top 2 UFO researchers after decades-long research. So go to Sibrel.com and
so
pray.
Where do they
it's
think
up
they're
there
from
in time.
if they're not from outer space?
They're interdimensional and potentially fallen angels, disguising themselves because they're liars. Of something, like you said, can't be proven or disproven. I'm from this galaxy 300 light years away.
This is kind of what Tucker Carlson thinks. He thinks there's a spiritual element to it, and he thinks they've always been here, and he thinks that this is what's kind of documented in the Bible as like good and evil. And
that's it, exactly. I mean, that's what's going on. I mean, the top 2 UFO researchers said UFOs are real, number 1. Number 2, they're not from outer space. And number 3, they're demonic. And that's what I talk about. Where it talks about fallen angels interbreeding with humans, it's talked about in Genesis 6, and creating a race called Nephilim, who were men of renown, world leaders.
So I could have stopped it right there before he started talking about the Nephilim, because I personally do not believe that at all. I don't believe that the Nephilim are specifically a race that has been congealed with angels. And the reason I don't believe that is because angels are never presented with genitalia that can reproduce. They're always presented as men because they don't have bumps on their chests. And so what I think is interesting that people get this idea as, oh, the Nephilim in Genesis 6, it must be the men of renown. You're really pulling hard to try to figure that out, because just because it says men of renown or the giants doesn't necessarily mean angels. Completely different. And also the same word is used after the flood. And so you're telling me that these things came down and they've created these huge humans. No. Huge humans have existed before the flood. There was a perfect atmosphere, a perfect food source, perfect, and we were enormous in human speak. And that was, and also, if you look at the, who was it? I want to say Philippians. It's not the Philippians. It's the Philistines. If you look at the Philistines, they were trying to create these giants. If you read through everything, you can see that it wasn't just Goliath that was a giant. They were creating many giants, and all these giants, it said in the Bible, have 6 fingers. 6 fingers is a well-known genetic abnormality that happens when you are inbred too much. You start growing exponentially, and you get an extra digit. Things happen. And so I think what we're seeing here, these Nephilim, men of renown, might have been, we know that we're fallen race. We can't marry our sister anymore because our gene pool is so terrible. Not that I would ever want to do that. But I think it's interesting that there is back then you could, because your gene pool was so well, and you also were a huge individual, because that's how God created us, much bigger than anything else. We're only half, even half, maybe a third of what we were back then. So it's interesting. So someone asked me, he says, who is then are the sons of God? Well, the sons of God, if you look through the whole Bible, the sons of God are people that absolutely loved the Lord. They were the people back then that truly loved God, and the daughters of men were the daughters that fell away. So you didn't want to intermingle with these two because you would not be you would fall away, basically. And we've seen this over and over again. Christ talks about don't marry an unbeliever and all this stuff. You can't be unequally yoked. And so you can extrapolate this. You know what? I might make a video about it because it's a topic that comes up over and over again. And I don't really talk about it because I don't see the danger in believing this way yet. But it's talked about so much, and it comes up more and more and more, that it's either a distraction or it's going to be a significant part of the deception. If you figured this out and you want to come to me and explain what in the world and why in the world this continues to erupt, because even if you do believe the Nephilim are a big deal, or that this idea that the angels procreated, who cares? This has nothing to do with salvation, and it's not going to deceive people. So I don't talk about it, but I don't believe it, and I'm frustrated about people that are presenting this over and over again because I don't know why it's being presented so much. But if I do figure it out, you'll be the first to know. Let's continue and talk about this because I have a whole Bible study on the Nephilim, but again, it's not really a huge problem for me to talk about. But there is something interesting, I think, that he brings up. He says that there was this thing where two things came together and had to be destroyed by the flood. I believe that. And I think he probably maybe said that a little later on. I don't believe that there are angels and humans. I think that the antediluvians were playing with genetics of animals and humans. And then there was a question of whether or not it still had the soul. I'm a Seventh-day Adventist, and the popular author that I pay close attention to, and I believe has some prophetic writings, is Ellen G. White. She has this to say. This is very interesting. But if there was one sin above another which was called for the destruction of the race by the flood, it was the base crime of amalgamation of man and beast, which defaced the image of God, in other words, combining these two, and caused confusion everywhere. God purposed to destroy by flood that powerful, long-lived race that had corrupted their ways before him. So what's happening here is they were playing with, you've seen those mythical figures of the deer and the human. I forget what they're called. Maybe someone in the chat can remember. Or maybe you saw them in Narnia, Tumas, I think it was his name. He was half human, half deer or something, buck. I don't know what he was. But I think they were playing with the genetics of the things. I wouldn't be surprised. Wouldn't be a surprise in the slightest if that was a real thing at one time and God said, you know what? I'm doing away with all this junk. I don't even know if that's not my creation anymore. How can I bring something that's not my creation to heaven? This needs to be destroyed so we can continue this. And so the reason why I bring this up is because we have the same thing happening today, except not with animals. We have it with machines. That's right, the artificial intelligence. You see us putting brain things into our brain to understand how we work with our brain, maybe even making us half cyborg, half not. And I believe in the very near future, we're going to be combining ourselves with partly machines. Our machines are going to be communicating in a way that AI is able to make us have special abilities. How can God, if we have changed our abilities and we don't even know if our brain is correct anymore, how can he bring that to heaven? What is going on here? This is a significant thing because it's just like in the days of Noah. We're playing with genetics again, and we're going to have to be destroyed. God can't use that. That's not something that God condones. So why is this happening? Well, I think we're seeing that right now, and it's not angels mating with humans. Angels are Ken dolls. Are you kidding me? And you have this amalgamation of man and machine instead. So that's what's happening right now. We have Tucker Carlson continues to talk about what he believes. So he referenced that, or Joe Rogan, I think it was, referenced that Tucker Carlson kind of believes this whole same thing about this stuff. And so what does Tucker Carlson actually believe? This last week, he went on further and talked a little bit about that. Watch this.
I feel like I've learned probably too much about a couple of topics because
and by the way, there's some things that I can't prove that I believe to be true, so I don't repeat them. But the UAP stuff, some of it is really distressing to me. What I believe to be true, but I can't prove it. But as I've said before, I think it's spiritual. I think some of these things are dark, anti-human. Probably some aren't, but
Do you think because there's potential anti-human properties that there's actually pro-human supernatural?
Well, I think God's real for sure. And as evil flourishes, you also see its obverse. You see good at work. You see God at work. I do in my life all the time in a way that I didn't say 5 years ago. I wasn't thinking like that at all. I'm a very secular person who grew up in a very secular world. Unlike you, I did not grow up in any recognizable church at all. And so I had none of those assumptions. But no, I think it's, in bad times like this one, there are miraculous and heartening moments. And I see that all the time.
Interesting, huh? Interesting. So he goes on and talks a little bit more about that, but he's on an interesting path, Tucker Carlson, and I appreciate some of the things he says about this. And Tucker, if you're listening, fantastic job. At least talking about some of this stuff out in the open. I really think you've cracked open the conversation to talk about these UAP things as spiritual. But as I said at the very beginning of the show, I don't think that the deception is going to be that they are angels or that they are spiritual or that they're demonic. I used to think that. I thought, wow, if we can just reveal that these things are demonic. So many people are believing this now that I'm beginning to think that the truth of this matter is going to be in the deception about the dead. Because as soon as the dead start appearing and saying these things are good, then everyone's going to start believing it. Right now, we're kind of the jury is out. Some people are saying that they are demonic, mostly Christian. Some people are saying that they are not. There's going to be some interesting conflict there until these things start appearing and talking to people. Then there's going to be a remnant that really comes out of that. That's what I think is happening right now. But let's get back to that Joe Rogan clip real quick about what he was talking about. He said one more very fascinating thing about this artificial intelligence. And it kind of rolls off of what I was saying. Watch this.
Would you interpret that as when you say interbreeding with humans? Now, imagine if what they are is a form of artificial intelligence. Or I should say, instead of artificial is a word that it's got a lot attached to it already. Maybe digital intelligence or human-created intelligence that's not of biological origin, but it is a living thing. It's just living in a different kind of way. Now, if that is something that human beings are eventually going to, we're going to have some symbiotic relationship with electronic that's biological. You're seeing it already with Neuralink. You're seeing how this guy who is paralyzed can now utilize a computer and manipulate everything with his mind. He can move a cursor around. You're seeing artificial intelligence come to the forefront where people are realizing the power that it has and how quickly it's developing. It's happening very rapidly. Within this year, it's kind of confusing people. When better artificial technology comes along and better interfaces come along and we start realizing that the only way that we are going to survive is if we integrate. Isn't that kind of the same as something coming down and interbreeding with human beings? If these things, if this is the path of progress, this is how it goes in intelligent life forms on complicated planets, when they have complicated technology. They develop internal combustion engines or some other source of power. They start manipulating their environment, and they eventually get to the point where they can make an artificial life form. And that artificial life form is far superior intellectually to the biological life form. And the only way the biological life form can survive is if it integrates with the artificial intelligence. And people will start to do it initially, and those people will have access to tremendous resources that biological people don't have, and then it'll be required, just like it's almost required for everyone to have a cell phone. Everyone's going to integrate. And in case, over time, what would that look like? Well, it'd probably look like aliens. It would probably look like some weird sort of creature that's not really biological anymore. So it doesn't have all the flaws of our primate DNA. It doesn't have all the, but does it have a soul?
Wasn't that a great clip to end on? Does it have a soul? And so a soul is actually just the combination of our body and the breath of life. And so a soul doesn't have its own consciousness. And so when the soul, when the breath leaves the body, it's not floating around somewhere waiting to talk to people. But I think it's interesting that Joe brings that out, that exact thing that we were just talking about, which was you can't amalgamate these two things and then expect it to absolutely be brought into the kingdom that way. So how in the world can we expect an amalgamation to happen? Now, I think it's going to happen slowly over time. I don't think that one day the antediluvians, which is a fancy word of saying the people before the flood in the Bible, were necessarily saying, all right, let's put this body on this deer over here, this deer head, and sew it back together. I don't think that's how it happened. I think over time, it's just like us. We were just like, hey, let's work this, let's add this, let's go over here. And before long, we were completely integrated, or they were completely integrating human beings with animals. That's ridiculous to think about. Again, no proof on this. I think it's interesting to think about, and the fact that we have myths that talk about this, I think, is fascinating. Maybe I'll do a little clip on this someday. If that's interesting to you, leave a comment, and I'll dig further into this this theory, this strange stuff. I mean, this is definitely a topic for this channel for sure. And I want to continue to say that if there's anything you guys want to talk about, if there's a topic that you think is very relevant, you need to present it. Comment, send me emails, bradley@strangenormal.org, because we need to look into some of the things that maybe we haven't seen before, and that we can build topics off of. If we don't do that, this channel is going to die. Another thing that's going to kill this channel is not being able to provide monetarily. So if you can, and God is pushing you, and this Holy Spirit reminds you to, if you're feeling pushed to do this, please join our Patreon, patreon.com/strangenormal. And we will see you there in the private Discord. But every little bit helps. Even if you just want to use some podcasts and stuff, you can pay the small fees to do that. So anyways, that's the presentation for tonight. We're going to cut air, but before I do, I want to also remind everybody, coming to Chattanooga, living here for a while, maybe you know friends or relatives in the area, tell them if you're looking for a house, I'm your man. Look me up. I have another YouTube channel that actually talks about Chattanooga and the amazingness about it. I go by my middle name on there to separate channels. But it's fascinating and it's really interesting, and I would really use your help to continue not only this channel, but also continue my life and continue presenting as it were. So I don't have to go back and get something that would prevent me from doing this. A lot of jobs today, and it's very frustrating, but a lot of jobs today, they say you can't have a social media account where you talk extensively and present things that we haven't vetted in our HR department. And I'm sure it's going to come to a point where we can't talk about the dangers in this the strangeness that's happening. You can't talk about in the dangers in the spiritualism, especially when some of the bigger churches, like the Catholic Church, is going to say that these spiritual phenomenon are a big deal. That's going to be hard to talk about on this channel if you have a job that tells you no, you can't talk about this. So that's why I have diversed my job abilities, and I have done a fantastic job of doing that. But one of the major things is being able to work for yourself and be your own boss. And one of the incomes I have is this real estate thing. So I appreciate everyone that is interested in continuing this mission, and is helping this channel and helping out and reaching out to me when you do have family that's coming to the universities, and also to move out here with them. Folks, it's that time again. And I'm reminding you that this is pure strangeness, an absolute normalcy. Strange, normal. We will see you again very soon.
You're watching Strange Normal, where the truth is the truth.